everybody, I'm Nora Burrows. I have these gray and orange, primarily gray and orange scraps here. So I of course thought, let's make a scrappy project. So I have a couple ideas, but let's just play around and see what we can come up with. So the first thing I'm gonna do is kind of create some stripes, I guess. And I think I'm just gonna start by using two fabrics. I'm gonna go with this gray here and then kind of this pinky one. So what I'm gonna do is put right sides together and then with my ruler, make lines. Now I'm gonna sew on these lines. Now that I've sewn on these lines, I'm gonna measure, let's see, 1/4 inch over. So I'll do this first line here, 1/4 inch over, and cut. And keep doing that. I'll go to the next line, 1/4 inch over, and cut. All right, so I noticed this first one I made a mistake because there's nothing sewn to this part. But for these other ones, open them up, give it a nice iron to all of these, and then I'll be able to sew them together to make kind of this stripy unit here. I will go ahead and sew this piece as well. In the meantime, while I was sewing this together, I also sewed just some of these random pieces together, so I will iron these as well. I iron kind of constantly. Pretty much anytime I sew a seam, I will give it a nice good iron. I think it's kind of the key to good patchwork. These are the pieces that I sewed together while I was sewing the stripes, and some of them make kind of interesting shapes, the ones that were sewn using this L and triangle. So let's see, what I'm thinking is I could kind of go on the diagonal like this. And then I wonder if I could use another one of these L shapes and put it here. I'll do that. Now I'd love to, let's see. I kind of like that these two fabrics are the same. So I think I'll put these together like that. Or I could put them like that, but I think I'll do this. For this one, I have a couple more of these triangles. So I think what I'd like to do is just cut this straight down here, and then I can add this triangle on like that. And this final piece, I'm gonna cut a straight line, and I'm not gonna attach anything to this yet. I'll save this piece here to attach to something else, and then I'm just gonna let this be and kind of see how things go. Here I have my strip, and I think it's looking great. Very excited about this. Not all the pieces are exactly the same width. They're not all, perfectly parallel, and I think that's kind of cool. It makes it look kind of funky and wonky. So what I'm gonna do is, I want to put this in a couple different spots on my quilt, and I think I'm gonna cut it into 3 sections here. And as this piece is kind of developed, I can maybe put one on the diagonal or one vertical and one horizontal. I'm not really sure, but for now I think I'm gonna focus on just this strip here. And I'm gonna sew this piece along this side and then perhaps cut that on a diagonal. I'm not really sure yet, but let me just sew this on and see how it looks. Then I have these other sections going that I've shown you, these two here, and I think I'm just gonna sew these two together. And here, when I do that, it starts to make kind of an interesting strip. I could even, after this, put another triangle down here somehow, maybe like this, and keep going. So I'll put these two pieces together. Then I have this little tiny nugget here, and I'll attach that onto the side. So by doing that, I'll just sew right sides together, 1/4 inch, and then open and iron. And I have these two pieces here, which I'm not sure that you've seen yet, but I'd like to kind of sew them so that it's a straight line. So I think if I sew them right sides together along this seam, that can look kind of cool. Finally, I have this unit here. Here, I'm going to cut a straight line and then sew a piece of this gray pinstripe onto the side. What I've done here that I want to show you is I attached these pieces like we talked about, but then I made a cut right on the diagonal here, and I'm going to move this piece up to the top to kind of enclose this section in this light gray. So I'll sew right sides together. I have two units here that I think I may be ready to put together. So I've expanded onto this one going to the right. This piece here I added on the same fabric. You can remember this is the triangles that I was surrounding in the gray. These two fabrics are the same. So what I thought I would do is trim this to be the same width of this, which would look kind of like this, and then line it up on the diagonal so that I could trim straight down. This would be a straight line there. I think that could look pretty cool, and then I could extend kind of down this way and maybe square up this piece right around here. This piece is getting quite large, which is exciting. I added this strip to the edge. What I'd like to do next is to take this leftover strip and somehow attach it over here. I don't want to line up these strips. I don't want it to look like this. I want it to be kind of staggered. So I'll add a piece of something on top, and then I'll sew this unit to this full unit. I've created two units here. This is the one that I've been taking you along the journey in the most, and then I've kind of created this one off camera. I think that we did start with that bit up there. I'd like to put these two together. I'm not sure how much I love that at this point. There's aspects that I really like and aspects that I'm not so crazy about. I could go kind of down this way instead, but I'm going to play around with that a little bit and see what makes sense. I think I know what I'm going to do now. So I finish this so that this is a 90-degree angle, that's a 90-degree angle, so that really I would only have to come up this way and then make that a 90-degree angle. However, I don't love how this is looking right now. There's a bunch of aspects that I do like, but there's a lot that I don't. So I think I figured out how to fix it. I think if I turn this on point like this, and then I kind of try and come out this way, maybe with just one fabric to kind of frame this as a wonky diamond, similar to kind of putting down, I have all of these strips here. I don't have a lot of this fabric, but I think if I were to cut this one in half lengthwise, I'd have two pieces of this. I have one here and here. You know, then the other section of what I cut this in half could go up there. And then I have some little pieces to fill in as well. And then I can kind of just work my way out. And I think that I'm gonna like that a lot better. So that is the plan. Now I had created a bunch of these other pieces here, as you remember, but I was just feeling that the really bright oranges and yellows just aesthetically are not working in this piece. So I think this will be a separate piece that I can work on simultaneously to this one. But this is, at this point, the one I'm really focusing on. I also have this strip here that I'm just remembering that, you know, I could go like that and then include that as part of the diamond that I enclose. So that's an idea. Here's how the piece is looking. I think it's pretty interesting. I added those strips along the border, as I mentioned. What I did, though, is I made them go from thick to thin, thick to thin, thick to thin, all the way around. Now, I think I'm going to continue that with another fabric. I have this piece, so it'll look something like that, but going all the way around. And again, so this one went from thick to thin. So this one will go from thin to thick, kind of the opposite around. I also have this fabric here that I think could go nicely, though it might just start blending all there might not be enough contrast between this layer, this layer, this layer, but I have this one here that I could use, though I think this one might be a little bit dark. Comparatively, I could bind the quilt in this, but next step, I'm gonna add this next layer of border on and then see where I'm at. I added this kind of camel colored border on, and I'm trying to decide how I'm feeling about this at this point. Part of me really likes it and part of me thinks that I'm not so sure. So what do I do next, right? I have trimmed up the top, the bottom, and the sides. So I need to fill in these triangles here. Now I do have some of these strips from when I cut the initial strips into, you know, thinner to thicker to thinner pieces. So I have 3 of them. I'm not sure what happened to the 4th. Maybe it was just too thin to save. But I do have another couple. This is the last of what I have of this. So I could sew a couple of these together. And then cut that to go from thinner to thicker. As I showed you before, I have this piece here. So I could then just put this right up against the edge. Now these pieces are pretty thin already, those thin triangles. So a lot's gonna get lost in the seam allowance. So part of me wonders if that's even worth it, if it's too thin to really read, or if it will just end up making it look messy. So I need to think about the next step. I've laid out this darker fabric underneath to see how I feel about it, if it is too dark or not. And I actually don't think that it's bad. I could fill in the spaces with this and also bind it in that, which might look nice. Here's a closer look of that particular fabric against the camel. I think it could work. I'm not so sure about binding it in that. Here is the finished top. I really love it. I'm still getting used to it, but I think it's kind of wonky and cool and weird and unique. So I'm always for that. I wanted to remind you that I do have a series of these Watch What I Make with These Scraps videos. So if you search Mostly Quilts, Watch What I Make with These Scraps, a bunch will come up. I also have a playlist with all of those videos. I think I'm going to bind it in this fabric here, and just to show you what that looks like a little bit. This is kind of how that will look. Now, this is also a scrap. I only have a little bit of it, but I measured it out and I think I have just enough to do the binding. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe. I will be showing this final quilt all quilted up and bound in probably a trunk show coming up. So subscribe so you don't miss that. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.